I knew they whispered about me. The hushed voices, the knowing glances over the rims of their crystal glasses filled with vintage wine. My mother and sister, perched in their palatial living room, draped in the weight of their inherited wealth, never needed to say the words aloud. I could hear them anyway. Another one of her ridiculous ventures, my mother would scoff, swirling her drink. You'd think by now she'd have learned. Sophia, my younger sister, would offer a smirk. She just doesn't understand her place. Some people are meant to build empires and some just chase fantasies. 31 I was the family disgrace. They hosted galas. I worked 16-hour days in a cramped, one-bedroom loft. They discussed investments and mergers. I analyzed lines of code and market algorithms, pouring everything into a startup they dismissed as doomed before it had even begun. What they didn't know, what I never let slip, was that I was standing on the precipice of something unimaginable. Their perfect world was about to shift. The plan had been set for me since birth. Ivy League education, a place at the family corporation, a husband who could solidify our status. I rejected all of it. I chose technology, chose risk. Instead of stepping into the cushioned safety of nepotism, I dove headfirst into fintech, working with a skeletal team on an AI-driven platform that could predict financial trends with uncanny precision. It was dangerous, it was ambitious, and it was mine. They didn't see brilliance. They saw failure. Sophia, the golden child, followed the script flawlessly. At 27, she was CFO of the family company, engaged to Andrew Carter, the heir to a billion-dollar real estate empire. Their wedding was to be the crowning event of the season, and I was the stray thread in the fabric of their perfection, reluctantly invited out of obligation. Just don't embarrass us, my mother's text read. I smiled. Oh, but they had no idea what was coming. The deal closed 3 days before the wedding. $50 million. A single contract transforming my startup into one of the most coveted assets in the financial world. By all projections, the company would surpass $150 million in valuation within 2 years. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every rejection had led to this moment. But I kept quiet. Timing was everything. The evening of the wedding arrived, bringing with it a slow, steady rain. Droplets clung to the windows of my car as I arrived at the grand venue. The dim glow of golden chandeliers visible even through the mist. The air was crisp, carrying the scent of wet pavement and fresh roses from the carefully curated floral arrangements outside the towering estate. I stepped into their world, a realm of glittering chandeliers, pristine white floral arrangements, champagne fountains, and designer gowns. Eyes turned. Murmurs followed. No one expected me to arrive like this, poised, confident, draped in a couture gown that screamed power, not desperation. Sophia's smirk faltered when she saw me. "Catherine," she said, her voice laced with that ever-familiar condescension, but now tinged with something else. Uncertainty. "I barely recognized you." I lifted a champagne glass, swirling it lazily. "I've changed." A slow sit. A calculated pause. Then I reached into my clutch and slid a plain white envelope across the table. "My wedding gift to you." Sophia scoffed, expecting a cheap gesture. A hand-painted card from years past. She tore it open, her expression morphing from amusement to confusion, then to something raw and unguarded. Her fingers trembled as they traced the number. $50 million. This isn't possible. I leaned forward slightly, my voice smooth. "It's real, Sophia. Every dollar of it." The silence that followed was suffocating. My mother's face paled as she snatched the papers, scanning them with disbelieving eyes. My father's jaw tightened, his carefully curated mask cracking under the weight of realization. "What have you done?" my mother breathed. "Built something. Without your help. Without your approval." Sophia's hands clenched the papers, her voice a whisper. "You succeeded. More than that." I let the words settle. "I outgrew you." And just like that, their carefully constructed hierarchy collapsed. 3 weeks later, the cracks in their perfect world widened. The Carter family, once untouchable, teetered on the edge of financial ruin. My technology had predicted it long before anyone else had seen the signs. They were drowning in bad investments, their empire crumbling from within. And Sophia? She was caught in the wreckage. Her call came at 10 a.m. "Catherine." A pause. A breath. "I need help." For the first time in her life, she understood what it meant to be powerless, to be desperate, to be on the outside looking in. I let the silence stretch before answering, my voice eerily calm. "Are you ready to start over?" "Yes." And so she did. Not as the privileged heir, but as a worker. She entered my company not as an executive but as an analyst. No special treatment. No shortcuts. She learned. She struggled. She grew. A year passed and she changed. The arrogance faded. The entitlement eroded. And one day she stood before me, holding a report in her hands, her own innovation and optimization model that improved the accuracy of our predictions by 8%. I read it. I nodded. "I'm impressed." For the first time, she didn't expect validation. She simply knew. Success had never been about revenge. It was about proving to myself that I never needed their world to thrive. That I was capable, not in spite of them but entirely on my own. I shut off my computer and stood. Outside my office, the city lights flickered in the twilight, a steady pulse of energy against the night sky. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a fresh, cool breeze. I inhaled deeply, letting the moment sink in. "Dinner?" I asked. Sophia met my gaze, something softer in her expression than I had ever seen before. "My treat." And just like that, we were no longer rivals but equals. And that was the greatest victory of all. Years later, as I looked out from the top floor of my corporate headquarters, watching the city spread out beneath me, I reflected on how far we had come. Sophia was now an executive not because of her name but because of her skills. My parents, once ashamed of my choices, now introduced me with pride. But none of that mattered as much as the simple truth: I had forged my own path. And in the end, that was the only success that ever truly mattered.